First things first, guys. How are you?
Wonderful. Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
So, what I want to start with is, I believe, and I'm not sure if I'm right, but I believe that you've been a band now for longer since you've reunited than you were before.
Correct.
So, how does this compare to the initial run?
It's never been. It's never really been comparable because when we started, obviously grew in a normal way as bands would, I suppose. And then when we stopped at a certain point, and then we weren't playing, and we kind of started again where I think somewhat in line with where we may have been years later.
Our first show when we were first a band was in a living room on a rooftop in Long Island in front of maybe 12 people.
Okay.
And our first show, since we've been a band again, was in the middle of the desert in front of 100,000 people. So that's how you compare the two.
So the sort of the trajectory continued even in the gap.
Right.
And that's
But so it didn't feel like you had to start over in any way?
It always feels like you have to start over, I think, in a sense, with every record.
Okay.
Yeah. I think some bands maybe are better at just like running forward, but for me it feels like starting over every time.
So every single album, it's.
I mean, we have new and different objectives for every record, so it's a new project, you know.
So if we go into the album that Outrage is now, do you remember the moment where that project kind of got its blueprint? Or when you started thinking about it?
I think it was pretty much right after, we were still mixing The Physical World, working on that. I remember driving with Jesse and we were talking about the next thing we're going to do because we were basing it off of almost a reaction to what we just finished. And so we knew what we wanted to do differently the next time. So the blueprint started pretty much as soon as we were done the first one, or as soon as we were done the Physical World. But even before we were finished it, really.
So with that in mind, then, how do you look back at the Physical World? Well, you say it's a reaction. So how did you experience the Physical World?
Well, I would say the Physical World was more of a reaction to our having started playing again and sort of feeding off of the audience in a sense. Like, we had played all of our old songs so many times for a lot of great fans, and people were excited when we come back, play those same songs again, and the response was overwhelming at times. I mean, we played these shows in London. And when we got back together again, and the crowd was singing along so loud that I couldn't hear Sebastien. I could almost not hear my bass. Like the crowd it was incredible. It made me not want to play. Like I just wanted to listen to it. I guess they would have stopped the singing. But I mean, things like that didn't happen to us the first time around. And seeing everyone, seeing the fans' reverence in this weird way for our band and the things that we'd done, that affects you. You can't. I don't know how you could not be affected by it, and I know that we were, and then it sort of made us feel a certain way about our own band, and that we would speak about the band at the time as like this third person, like the band wasn't the two of us, and because the band as a concept had existed when we weren't playing for really as long as we had played for previously. I think when we approached that record as though we were stewards of something that was bigger than us. And maybe that is true, and maybe it was true of the moment, but that's not the way forward for us. To always be shackled to the past is not a great place to be creatively.
Or socially.
Yeah, really. Oh yeah, God! That little firework just went off in my brain, and I'm censoring it. So this record is nothing like that in a way. Now it's just these are just the songs that we wanted to make, and it's not about not being concerned about the past.
Right.
And the band is us now.
I have one more question about that time that you didn't play, because you say everything was building and there was a certain reverence for the band and it was growing. What do you attribute that to?
I think it's because we weren't around. I think there's like a certain kind of cult appeal to the band, and some things in culture become people feel like they own it because it was small when they discovered it, or and so there's a lot of people that they still come out and say, well, I've been a fan of yours since the beginning, and I always think about that first show, and it's like, well, you weren't there at the beginning.
I know all 12 of them.
Yeah. But
well, it's like
also it was unavailable. It's scarcity. It's like a beautiful woman that you're attracted to, but you can't have her, so it makes it even your desires even more maybe.
Well, you're in my head, because I was going to say.
I am.
Yeah. Well, because I was just about to say.
Think of a beautiful woman.
No. What I was going to say was if Marilyn Monroe hadn't died and we'd watched her get old and end up playing the grandmother in a John Waters film or whatever she would have ended up doing, would her image be as iconic? Mm-hmm. Right? It's because she was sort of encapsulated in that moment, and so that the concept of her is very defined and it's finite.
So what we're saying is, by being a band again, we're devaluing our band somehow.
Well, I think we've got to have both.
Yeah.
So it would be as though, we're like Marilyn Monroe, resurrected and prettier than ever.
Mm-hmm.
But you raise an interesting point, because obviously you have that thing of the Club of 27 in music, where people who've died quite young and they have a certain legacy or myth around them.
Mm-hmm. Well, they didn't have an opportunity to screw up, right? Like we watch Marlon Brando get older and bigger until he looks like a manatee, and James Dean is just this young, beautiful man forever, right? Marlon Brando was that young, beautiful man at one point.
Man, and Marlon Brando, Streetcar Named Desire.
I can tell, sister.
He's like rubbing his nipple. I mean, it's a gorgeous man.
But so think about the difference in terms of the way those two figures are seen, and really kind of like both from the similar starting point. So, I mean, the band, thankfully, we didn't have to die or become obese.
But like
there's still time for both those things. In fact,
what have you got planned?
Would you like some cake? How about some spaghetti meatballs?
But like you say, then there's the band kind of almost gets bigger than the two of you. So did that add a lot of pressure, and then especially going into this album?
That's true for any band, like when Bono wakes up and lets out his big morning fart, he's just some fucking guy,
Sure.
Like he's not U2 at that moment, It takes probably a couple of hours for him to become Bono, the lead singer from
I'm pretty sure he just wets his hair and puts on his sunglasses and he's there. The sunglasses just keep growing. Sorry.
No, okay. So you say the blueprint was already there straight after the physical world. So what was it specifically that you didn't want or wanted to do instead?
It was, I mean,
I don't know how defined it was.
Yeah.
It's not really like, when you're making a record and you're writing new songs, for me the song isn't finished being written until the record is done. Because once you have the recording, you may have written it one way. Now there's, maybe you notice something that you wanted to edit, you can change things right up until the last moment. So it's hard to, I mean, it's easy to talk about the record in hindsight in terms of as though this was just like a perfect a reflection of where our heads are at, but it is a record of the growing process during that time. And when you start off with tons of songs, the record could be all sorts of different things from the same group of creativity, right? And
Right.
Eric Valentine, we allowed him to really decide what was going to be on the record, and then we whittle it down further ourselves from there. So it's the most concise and like the best sort of, we think the best experience you could have with our creativity, I suppose. But it's not until it's over that you really have that sense of exactly how it's going to go. And even originally we had a couple other songs on the record that we weren't 100% about putting on the record, and I remember the day that we spoke and whittled it down to the 10, and I listened to those 10 songs. That's when it really made sense to me. Like, and once you've decided on the order of the songs, how they flow into each other, now it's like, okay, this is done. Because in a sense, an album is very similar to a song, in that the song goes through changes and movements, and you want to kind of have the album be the same thing. And we think of them in terms of sides because we're vinyl. Like, okay, how does this chapter 1, chapter 2? And once all of that's done, then it's easy to have the sense of it. So all I'm saying is it's difficult to answer the question.
The vision for the record is manifest in the entire process. It's not like you wake up with this full epiphany of this ideas obviously pop in your head, and sometimes very clear ideas. But as far as the record goes, it's the act of making it and all of the little components, whether they're creative or technical. That's what ends up being the statement. So you start with kind of the nucleus of it is small things like, we want there to be a real separation between vocal melody and bass melody so that they're not both happening at the same time. We want the drums to be in a small room and tough sounding, like our very first recording, and like you start with these kind of little guiding principles, and then that's what starts the whole ship.